Hi, I'm Robert. Welcome back to another on-the-road video brought to you by ApplianceVideo.com. Stop. Before you begin any repair, unplug the appliance from the wall outlet. It is also recommended that you check for proper voltage. Remember to also turn off the water. The tools you will need to complete this repair are tape for the washer lid, a 1/4 inch driver, adjustable pliers, a putty knife, a No. 2 Phillips driver, an Allen wrench, a 3/8 inch driver, a pipe wrench, bearing tool, and a large adjustable wrench. Some additional tools you may need are a bottle jack and several pieces of 2x4 cut to size. Today we're working on a Whirlpool Cabrio Platinum top load washer. It's got a noise complaint during spin. We've determined that the bearing is bad, and I'm going to run the spin cycle so that you can hear what we're looking at. It'll go through its processes, and basically what you're going to hear is the sound of a freight train. You can start to hear the grovelly sound right now, and it's in the low speed rotation. Now you can hear it ramping up. And that sound is the sound of bad bearings. So we're going to stop it. And we're going to get to work disassembling the machine so we can replace the bearing kit. To begin this repair, there's some precautions you want to take because the springs on this lid are very strong and you could potentially knock a hole through drywall. So what we want to do is we want to get some tape on the lid, and I'll finish peeling that tape over after I raise the lid. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove a cover bracket on the rear that covers the wire harness. It's a 1/4 inch hex screw. Then we'll remove the 1/4 inch hinge screws. Now that we have the screws off of the back hinges, we're going to slide the top forward and then lift up as we move back. Don't let your lid fly. And then we will continue taping the lid. Now, we're going to let the top rest back against the wall, and we're going to remove the subtop, which is right here. Now, to remove the subtop here, we're going to need to undo a series of snap pins that are approximately 6 inches away from each other all the way around the top. Also, we're going to disengage the recirculation pump hose off of the subtop. So we'll do that first. It's a spring clamp. We're going to depress it and move it back on the hose. And then we're just going to push the hose back. You may need to wiggle the hose to break the seal, like so. Now, on each one of these snaps, you need to press down on the subtop and peel the subtop lip off of the hook. And we're going to repeat that process all the way around the subtop till we're completely unsnapped. Now that we have all of the snaps undone, we'll just remove the subtop and set it aside. Now we're going to remove the wash plate. To begin, we must get this little cap off that covers the bolt that holds the wash plate down. I'm using a putty knife and I pry it up where there's an open notch. Next, you want to remove the wash plate by gripping at least 2 of the paddles and sliding it up. Sometimes it does not come out so easy. You may need some metal hooks that'll fit through these little holes and be able to pull it up by those. The next step is to remove the drive hub. It's held in by 6 number 2 Phillips screws. Pulling out the drive gear with the washer. Set that aside. When you have a situation that occurs like we have here, the tub is pretty much semi-fused to the spline here, which is a shaft. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in a block of wood and utilize a bottle jack to help us get that tub out. First, we'll take a block of wood and we'll set that on the spline. Then we'll take our bottle jack and set it on the wood. Take a 2x4 cut to size to fit the inner lip of the basket. Once that's in place, we'll start cranking our bottle jack, which is going to put pressure on the bottom of the upper basket and on the top of the spline to separate the two. You can actually see the tub rising up. So, we're almost there, but not quite. We're going to take our wash plate bolt and we're going to screw that down into the spline. Then we're going to put our block of wood on top of the bolt. Then we'll reposition our bottle jack. And we are going to put a piece of 2x4 down inside. And reposition our other 2x4 and crank back up to get it the rest of the way out. Alright, now that got the basket up high enough that one good yank and we got it up off the spline. So we're going to use the 2x4s just like a handle and pull the basket out of the machine. You want to be careful because these little knobby holes on all around the side of the basket, we lovingly refer to them as the cheese grater. It'll tear up your clothes and can cut you. So now we will lift the basket out of the washer and set it aside. Now that we've removed the tub and we've tilted the unit back, we have access to the lower components. The first one we're going to remove is the rotor, and this is held on by an Allen set screw. And we're going to get our Allen key in there and unscrew the screw. The screw will feel like it's tightening up as you're unscrewing it. This rotor is lined with magnets, so you got to watch your fingers when you go to pull it out because you can get them caught between the rotor and the stator. Okay, feels like our bolt is all the way out, and we're going to grasp the rotor on equal portions and wiggle it out, and we'll set that aside. Next, we're going to remove the stator, and the stator is held in by 4 3/8 bolts. Those are usually in pretty tight. So what I'm going to do is use a manual wrench to get those started. Once you have them all broken free, take your driver, you want to keep your hand there to support the stator. We'll take the collar and the last bolt out, and then we're just gonna wiggle the stator until it drops down, and then we'll disengage the strain relief supports for the wire harness, and we'll lay the stator down. Next, we want to remove the large nut here in the center. Okay, so using a pipe wrench, you grasp onto the spline of the shaft and then get either an adjustable wrench or your channel locks on the nut and break it free. And then continue to unscrew it. We'll remove this cover plate for the stator. Slide that out of the way. And then continue to remove the large nut. Once you got it loose enough, you can remove it the rest of the way by hand. And we want to knock the spline up through the bearing. Now, to finish, we're going to knock the shaft through the tub. And then we'll use our bearing tool to make sure that it's all the way through. Then we're going to get our bearing tool on the bearing up inside the tub and knock it loose. So let's see. Now we'll go back up top and work on the lower bearing. Now you want to go in from the top and get your tool on the lower bearing. Give it a couple of whacks. Then go to the other side. Give it a couple of whacks and the bearing drops right out. So now we'll finish off the upper bearing. And the bearing is removed. Now that we've cleaned the inside of the tub out a little bit, we're going to separate our bearing tool. That way we can get the top bearing in place and get that cranked down. You want to get your bearing in place
get your bearing tool on it. And you want the rod of the bearing tool down into the sump area. And now we're going to tip the machine back and reassemble the tool. We'll reassemble our bearing tool on the underside of the unit. And we want to take our wrench and get it on the nut and begin to tighten the tool. This will essentially pull the bearing down into the tub. And you want to get this as tight as you can to make sure that that bearing is fully seated. And now we can take the tool apart. So now we are going to insert the spacer and bearing and reassemble the bearing tool. And then we're going to take our wrench and tighten the bearing tool to press the bearing and spacer into position. Now we'll remove the bearing tool. And now we'll go back up top side. Now pull the bearing tool. Now we'll install the shaft and make sure that the shaft bottoms out on the top bearing. Push it down as far as you can with your hand and then give it a little tap just to make sure that it's fully seated. Now we'll go to the bottom of the unit to install the locking nut and the lower components. Now we'll install our lock nut that holds the shaft in place, and it will be a little bit tough to turn. So now we'll get our adjustable wrench in place and tighten it down on the nut. And then our pipe wrench back on the spline. Now once you get that nut almost to the bearing, you want to lock it down real good using your leverage with your two wrenches. And now we can begin to reinstall the lower components. Now this next part's a little bit tricky. You got to put this cover on the stator, and this raised portion has to cover the RPS sensor. So we're going to align that, and there are some tab points on the inside of the stator that show you where it goes. Then we're going to pick up the stator with the cover, and we're going to start popping in all our strain reliefs on the wire harness, because that's going to aid you in aligning the RPS sensor where it needs to be, and it's also easier to get those strain reliefs in when you can see the holes. So now we're going to get the RPS sensor into this well that's cut out in the bottom of the tub on the right side. All right, so now once you got everything aligned, you want to take your retainer ring for the stator with one of the screws on it and slide that over the spline and line the screw up with one of the holes. And then get that started by hand. And then polar opposite from that one, you want to get another one started. Now that will remain in place while you get the other two started. Now getting these screws started by hand does a couple of things for you. It helps to hold it in place while you screw the screws in with your driver, but it also keeps you from stripping the screw holes. Now that our stator is securely in place and properly positioned, we're going to install the rotor. And first we'll plug this last strain relief into the bottom of the tub. You want to take the rotor and you want to hold it by the sides. You don't want to get your fingers pinched in between. So you're going to bring that up to the stator and you'll feel the magnetic pull. And then you just want to rotate it until it pops onto the spline. And then you want to take your Allen key and you want to turn the screw, the Allen screw, backwards to find your threads in the spline. And once you find your threads, go clockwise to screw it in. And while it's easily moving, I'm using the rotor to turn it. And then once it tightens up, now I'll start going back to turning the Allen key itself. And you want that Allen screw flush and tight against the rotor so that it doesn't unscrew while the machine is operating. Now once you get to where you think it's fully tightened, you want to take a hammer or other tool and hold the rotor with your hand and the Allen wrench and give it a couple of taps just to make sure it's nice and tight. Now let's go back up top and install the seal so that we can put the basket back in. So we're going to apply the grease to the inside of the seal first. We're going to cut the tip of the tube, and we're going to go right into the center of the seal, like so. Put a liberal amount of grease. Now that we have our grease in there, we'll set that tube aside. We'll take our adhesive, and you want to apply your adhesive to the outside of the seal, half to bottom. Okay, so we got a good amount of adhesive on there. And then we're going to ride the seal down the shaft and take our press tool and put it on the seal, and as it implies, press it in place. You want to make sure that that seal is fully seated, and then you want to wipe away your excess adhesive. And your seal is installed. Now we can reinstall the basket. I left the bottle jack and boards in the basket from when we pressed it out. Makes for a nice little handle to pick the basket up with. So we're going to set the basket on its side and just kind of roll it into the tub. So now we're hitting the wood. I'm going to lower the bottle jack. That way I can remove the wood and continue to seat the basket like so. Now we're going to reinstall our gear and cam for the basket. Now we have our drive gear with the washer on it. We're going to set that over the spline and press it down as far as it'll go. Then we're going to take our drive cam and we're going to set that down as far as it'll go. I'm going to put 2 screws in at polar opposites, and then take my number 2 Phillips and get those screws started. I'm going to start in reverse to find my threads. Get the other one started. And then we're going to lock these 2 down. Now that those screws are in tight, we can just put the others in. So basically, now we're ready to install the wash plate. Now that we have our wash plate in hand, let's go ahead and set that down onto the spline. Drops right down. Take our 7/16 bolt, put that down, get it started by hand, and then take our driver and finish it off. Now we can replace the cover cap and move on to the subtop. The cover assembly here has little teeth on it. There's 3 of them, and they fit into these holes on the top of the wash plate. So you just want to line those up and snap it in place. So we have our sub top. Set it down for a minute. Make sure that you make note, oh, that's where the hose connects. So you want to rotate it so it's going to meet with that hose. And then you're sure to have installed it in the proper position. So we're going to bring it down and get it ready to snap in all the way around. We want to make sure that everything that's supposed to be on the inside of the tub is, and everything that's supposed to be on the outside of the tub is on the outside. So now we'll just reconnect the hose. And grasp the spring clamp, pinch it and move it forward on the hose. And release. You want to make sure, most importantly, you want to make sure that these two ends of the spring clamp are seated directly side by side. You don't want them off at all. If they are off in position at all, then this will leak. Now let's go ahead and lower the top and remove our tape that holds the lid down. Move the whole top forward. That way it gets on the clips, and then push it back. And now we have to reinstall the screws on the hinges and the cover strap for the wire harness and pressure hose. Now for this, we'll switch back to our 1/4 inch driver, and we'll put one screw in this side. Then we'll move over to the other hinge. And get that screw in. And then our cover, you're going to slide the little slot tab into the slot provided. Bring the plate over, line up your screw hole. And screw it in, and that completes the repair.
Thank you for watching another quality video brought to you by ApplianceVideo.com.